to reset the videos, and pretty simple show tonight.
Yeah. And you got the opening video and the closing.
Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I got everything loaded. So. And that's it. We're ending with a video. It's like 3.5 minutes long.
Okay.
So just let it roll. It's that volcano one.
Cool.
So just at 9 o'clock, turn the stream on? Tell them, yeah, tell them to just go live. Okay. It doesn't matter, we'll just be careful what we say, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
And I guess check the audio level as well.
And it sounds loud. Check 1, 2, yeah, what's that all
The
about?
aux is low.
I do want a little bit, but I don't need to hear myself. Okay, here. On this side, yeah.
Okay. See what that.
Are we good? 1, 2, 1, 2.
Let me know. All right, when you're ready.
All right. Hang on, let me. I just got to set these videos. All right, there's that. All right. All right, here we go. Okay, we're going. Welcome to another edition of Media Mashup. I'm Dean Lee. And so, as usual, we have a whole bunch of stories to get to tonight. And so let's just go ahead and get started. And once again, we're live tonight. This is the second show we've done. So if you're watching us on AT&T, or we're also on YouTube, if you type in media, mashup, 2 words, and then I believe it's live with another word. And so if you want to watch us on YouTube, or you are, welcome to the show. And so let's get right to our first story. And this first story has to do with the FCC. Oh, that's all right. So I can't move the stuff around. The FCC's new rules on net neutrality. And so the idea is that they were sort of locked on whether or not they were going to have. Oops. Yeah, right away I'm already having problems. Let me see if I can get this to. I have no touch screen. All right, so I'll have to just stand out of the way. So the idea here is net neutrality is the idea of making sort of the internet fair for everybody and not allowing certain companies to make it quicker or faster for users to consume their content, like Netflix or Hulu or any other, let's say streaming services, video games. Sony has a new one, On Live, which is a video game service that allows you to stream live video games. Or Twitch. So what the idea is that any of these services, they wouldn't have special treatment under net neutrality laws, and you'd have to basically treat the internet as a public utility, or in the public good. And so that's the idea. And so in the last few weeks, it's really been divided between Republicans and Democrats, and the Republicans have not wanted was it the House Rules Committee or something, to move forward on allowing or to vote on allowing the FCC to put the internet under what's called Title II, or the idea of it becoming a public utility, very similar to the phone company. And so that's kind of the idea. And then there's some interesting stuff here that's going on around this. Twitter has sort of thrown their, if you want to look at it as their hat in the ring, basically siding with the idea that net neutrality is a good idea, and they're arguing that the internet gives a voice to the voiceless, or the people that are sort of think of the uprising in Egypt, the people that were looking to change the government went to social media. Twitter was instrumental in that kind of stuff, or other uprisings around the world. And so Twitter is saying that net neutrality sort of follows the thought or the way that they view the internet being used for sort of once again for the public good. And so they're saying that basically from a press release, which you're looking at right here, they're saying that safeguarding the historic open architecture of the internet and its ability for all users to innovate without permission is critical to America's economic aspirations and our nation's goals, global competitiveness. These rules have important implications on the freedom of expression. So they're even linking the idea to the First Amendment, or basically saying that without an open internet, or if we allow people to block it or to, put up barriers or things like that, that it would limit the freedoms that people sort of now enjoy, or however you want to look at that with the internet. And so CNET has put up 8 burning questions about net neutrality, and I kind of like this article because it's a rundown of all of the stuff that is sort of important. I should say that the vote is tomorrow. I don't know if I said that. I'm trying to think of everything to say at the same time I'm talking about it. So tomorrow is the day that the committee will vote on moving forward with a bipartisan sort of a compromised version of net neutrality. And then the 8 burning questions. The first one is, what is net neutrality? And basically it says exactly what I just said, that all traffic on the internet should be created equal, and that rules should apply to anyone, whether you're checking Facebook or Instagram, or you're watching videos on YouTube, shopping on Amazon, whatever you're doing, that everything should be equal to everyone. And then, the second one is, why does this matter to me? And I think that's pretty simple. If you do any of those activities, you definitely want to continue. And that's what really leads to question number 3, which is, what is going to change when these rules are adopted? And the short answer, nothing. So if the rules are adopted and the internet is governed like a public utility, you won't see any change, which is actually what you want. The idea here is that we want to continue going about or doing things the way we were doing, and basically allowing the internet to exist for future generations, or other people to sort of innovate and to do things that we've sort of had the pleasure to do so far, as it's been around the last 20 years. The internet's been around about that long. And then it says, if nothing would happen to the internet and these rules are adopted, why should I care? And then obviously moving forward, if nothing was to happen, then you would have companies that would be allowed to slow traffic down that they either were in direct competition with, or they felt maybe hinder their business model or something like that. And so they can make sort of deals behind closed doors with the internet service providers to allow them special treatment or special services and this kind of stuff for internet speeds. And so and then it says if everybody agrees on the rules, it said why are we still talking about this? And to be truthfully honest, what they need to really do is they need to vote. So government needs to get involved, and when you have rules in place and you want them to be implemented, you need to come to a vote. And so really, and I'm going off the script, and so this is me answering that particular question. If you have, what the government needs to make a vote so that we can put these or enact these into law so that they are, what sort of governs, the use or it really is reclassifying the internet. And then I think that, okay, so yeah, in this or whatever they talk about the reclassifying, and there was a really good, okay, so it says net neutrality is really about whether the government should reclassify broadband as a so-called Title II telecommunications service under the 1934 Communications Act. The internet service providers are treated as a Title II service. The FCC then can regulate them using the rules originally established around the old telephone networks or the landline services that exist today. It says this legal definition establishes broadband as a common carrier, a centuries-old concept that means their networks must be open to everybody. So that is what the central argument around all of this is. And tomorrow, if they vote in favor, which it looks like they've got enough votes to actually to make that happen, it will be a day, it won't change history, but it'll definitely be a history-making day. For preserving what we now sort of like to use. And then the other thing too is, and it goes into this, is tomorrow, is that it? Once they vote, if they go in favor of this, which is sort of, it looks like they're going to, this probably will be locked up in court. So it will tomorrow mark the end of this battle, and the answer is no, because lawsuits, I mean, they've already, both sides have been threatening to sue AT&T, Verizon, and some of the cable operators, and they're legally challenging the idea of the Title II approach. So they're basically saying that the internet is not, I don't know, it used to be dial-up, and that goes right over a phone line. So any extension of that, I would kind of argue right away that this started out in the telephone service, and it's still, even though, I mean, we look at telephones, even though we now use cell phone towers, and they don't go over the landlines. And so I would argue that, yeah, the advancement of technology has moved it away from, basically tones over the phone, but it's a phone service. And so I guess it makes sense to move it under this Title II. And the argument was, for a long time, this battle, when it was still kind of in the geeky stage, and it was mostly the internet, the startups and sort of the internet entrepreneurs, if you want to look at it that, were really the ones paying attention to this. There was a lot of argument over the FCC not having the regulations over the internet at all. So it was outside of their jurisdiction. They did try to implement net neutrality rules years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I think is when that all went down, and the ruling was you don't have authority over this. Basically what they're doing now is they're going to rule to give themselves authority. So, and then I think we're going to move away from net neutrality, and let's talk about the Academy Awards. So Sunday night, here in Los Angeles, especially, if you were anywhere near Hollywood and Highland, you knew you couldn't escape the idea that the Academy Awards were in town, or that there was that time of year. I shouldn't say that they were in town, but that time of year. And it was a big win for geeks, nerds, technology, however you want to look at it. This is kind of a weird story. I don't know if it was a surprise or there's something else going on here, but the documentary Citizen 4 actually won the Oscar for Best Documentary, and it is the story basically of Edward Snowden, the whistleblower, or the person that leaked all the information about the techniques of data gathering of intelligence and people's information by the NSA, the National Securities Agency. And so The idea here is that, I mean, I should start off this way. The documentary is about Snowden originally bringing these documents to reporters, and then the producer of the movie, Laura Poitras, was the documentarian, if you want to look at it that way, who thought she should bring a camera along, and literally this is the footage of Snowden in Hong Kong in the hotel, handing over the documents to the media and figuring out what they were going to do next in how to maybe handle the media or where they were going to go from this. Some of the things I thought are very interesting. This movie, I don't know if, there's a lot of people that think the Academy Awards has been, it's been planned, or, I don't know, I'm trying to stay away from the word rigged, but, that the winners there's more political reasons behind the winners than just the fact that it's a good movie. This one, there's some weird stuff going on here. The movie was released just in enough theaters to allow it to be a part of the Academy Awards. It won. And then, obviously, there's something going on because HBO aired the documentary for the first time to the public on Monday night. Those just seem to line up kind of weird. And then we'll move away from this, but the actual the chief, the National Security Agency director, Mike Rogers, on Monday defended the agency's online spying tactics on Monday. So the Academy Awards are Sunday. Citizen4, wins for Best Documentary. You have the NSA director defending the, having a press conference after the movie wins for an Academy Award, because I didn't actually do a story on the statistics here of how many people watched it, the Academy Awards, but it's in the millions. So there are now millions of people out there that are aware of this movie exists. And being a documentary, it's kind of an accurate account of what happened between Snowden and the media. And so, there's going to be an interest in that. And so it makes sense the NSA would come out. But there's some stuff going on here where it goes a little bit beyond just a coincidence. Not only are they kind of defending the idea that, they need to gather this intelligence, they really attack Snowden himself. And they're saying that, this has Snowden's actions have had a material impact on the ability to generate insight to what the terrorist groups around the world are doing. And that's a direct quote from the NSA director, Mike Rogers. Anyone that thinks different has had no impact, doesn't know what they are talking about. And so, he's trying to basically say that you are, not only, the idea, if Snowden was to ever come back to the U.S., he'd be charged with espionage. But if, and I don't know, I would think by now, especially if you're gonna come back and you're gonna be such a high-profile person, now would be the time. I would be really, if I was in this position, I would be considering right now as a time to possibly, with a legal team and all this stuff or whatever, now would be the time to do it, because you are in the front of, all of the conversation going on, especially now that this movie kind of, won the Academy Award and it's on everybody's mind. And then, like I said, showing it on HBO the day after the Academy Awards, all could be coincidental, but, kind of an odd thing. And I don't get HBO, and I'm one of the cord cutters, and so, it's like they put it on HBO Go, and it's one of these documentaries that everyone should see. And so it's, I haven't seen the movie, and I've seen all of the content around it. I've seen the interviews about it. I've seen some of the making and how they got all of the information from it. So I feel like I've seen it without seeing it. And really, it should be made, it's one of these ones where it should be made available, like the Intercept, the production company, they should put up on their website and allow people to watch this. It's already been aired on HBO. Putting it on HBO Go and making everybody go and subscribe to watch this, I don't know. I obviously want to see it, so I'm a little biased here, but it seems like you'd want a lot more people if your goal is to make everybody aware. In fact, her quote, which is right there on the screen, is "We are all Snowden," right? So basically saying that, everything that he did about protecting our privacy or releasing the information about how our privacy isn't being protected, I guess is the way to say it. You know, it seems like we have a right to kind of know what went on. And then just to move on, this is the story about Rogers. And then here is on the channel guide, they just talk about the HBO airing the special. It aired on at 9 o'clock. And then it just, you know, it goes on and on to talk a little bit about what I just said. And it talks a little bit about the actual movie and what it is. And so the next thing I want to do is I just want to go ahead and show the trailer to it. Like I said, everybody should see it, but I can't do that. So this is an hour show. I can't, even if I had the whole entire movie, I don't. So the best I can do is a trailer. So let's go ahead and watch the trailer, and then we'll get into some more news after that.
Laura, at this stage, I can offer nothing more than my word. I am a senior government employee in the intelligence community. I hope you understand that contacting you is extremely high risk. For now, know that every border you cross, every purchase you make, every call you dial, every cell phone tower you pass, friend you keep, site you visit, and subject line you type is in the hands of a system whose reach is unlimited, but whose safeguards are not. In the end, if you publish the source material, I will likely be immediately implicated. I ask only that you ensure this information makes it home to the American public. Thank you, and be careful. Citizen 4.
Sorry, I don't know anything about you.
Okay, I work for,
Sorry, I don't know your name.
oh, sorry, my name is Edward Snowden. I go by Ed. Edward Joseph Snowden's the full name.
Oops. All right, so that is the trailer for Citizen 4. And by the way, just two things I want to say before we move on. And obviously, there's more of the Oscars and sort of geeky news, especially right here in Pasadena. So one of those things I want to say is there was a lot of talk about where the name Citizen 4 originated from. And when I was listening to one of these interviews, Snowden picked Citizen 4 because he felt as though more people were going to come out and talk about this, and so he didn't want to be the first but not the last, and so he picked this idea of calling himself Citizen 4 as the idea of he was hoping that there were more people that were within the the government agencies at which he was a contractor for that would also come out. And one other quick piece of information, that Snowden during the interviews never had the idea of staying anonymous. Anybody that's seen the movie I'm thinking Watergate, All the President's Men, Deep Throat, that was a character that literally took the secrecy of who he was to his grave. Actually not really, but, close enough. And then, so you never really found out who that particular anonymous source was. When Snowden was in the hotel room, he actually said he wanted to get the information out to the public. So he was going to implicate himself as the source of the leak of the information right from the beginning. He never had any other way of thinking about, making this anonymous throughout. And the reason he said it is he didn't want the government to go through an interrogation process for everybody else that was sort of left behind. So he took the information. When he leaked it to the media, if he had left it anonymous, the government would have came in and they would have sort of shook up all of the contractors and all that kind of stuff, trying to figure out who the person was that leaked the information. And he felt that that was unfair to the people that really didn't want to be involved in this. And so he took it upon himself, which is a pretty noble thing. I mean, it doesn't, it's almost a heroic action if you look at it. I mean, he literally has thrown himself in the fire. And I mean, all of the information that's now come out about it, at the beginning, there were a lot of people who were skeptical on who he was and what his motives were and all this or whatever. But, this documentary might change all that stuff. So let's talk about Interstellar. This won the best Oscar for visual effects. Now, Interstellar is another movie about space travel and getting caught and all this sort of crazy thriller. But right here in Pasadena, one of the people that was involved in the helping with sort of the science and the behind the scenes is a professor at Caltech. And so the quote, when they won for visual effects, some of the accepting the award, let's see, and it's Lockley, but I don't know who, I was trying to find the full name of the person, but the person that was accepting the award backstage said, thank you to Chris Nolan and Emma Thomas for taking us on this amazing voyage across space and time. And thank you to one of the smartest people on Earth, Professor Kip Throne of Caltech, and all the explorers of science who show us that the universe is an amazing and terrifying beauty. One of these Oscars apparently is good for a free drink, so we're going to go and test that out back there. So that's the quote from the people behind Interstellar, thanking Kip Throne, which is kind of the go-to guy in the movie industry for science. He was also behind, I know this for a fact, what was the, just skip my mind like completely, the big movie that was just out. Anyways, it'll come to me in like mid-thought. Anyways, he's very well known for his Gravity. I knew I just spit it out. So he was some of the science behind the movie Gravity as well, and so he's the kind of the go-to guy. But here in Caltech, Pasadena, a lot of the movies get consulting, including, I won't ramble on with this, but Avatar, and bad with names. I'm trying to do this off the top of my head, and it's just not working. So so Interstellar won for visual effects, and so we still got a little bit more Oscar news. And so our next story is kind of weird. It's about Microsoft. And so Microsoft, and really, Microsoft Oscar win, prediction models nails 20 out of 24 awards. Now that's a misleading headline because Microsoft didn't do anything. So the prediction model developed by David Rothschild, an economist in Microsoft's New York City lab, currently predicted 20 of the 24 Oscars. And so there's a picture of him right kind of down in the corner of the screen. And he's no stranger to this. Every year he kind of nails the Oscars within that sort of margin using his techniques. He's also done elections. In the 2012 election, he was able to predict 50 out of the 51 states, including the territories, about who would, in fact, if you wanted to look at it, it'd be perfect because we only have 50 states. But so 50 out of the 51 voting territories of the United States. So, but he was able to predict all of the big, including Best Picture, the director, actor, actress, supporting actress, and then a few of them that, the ones that he got wrong were some of the minor ones. I don't know if that matters. The prediction in itself is pretty good. There was another thing going on here that's weird. I could be just in conspiracy mode or whatever, but you have this story come out the day after the Oscars, but to anybody that watched it, host Neil Patrick Harris literally opened his briefcase. He had this whole running joke going on through the Academy Awards about what he had in the briefcase. And at the end of it, he opens it up and it's his Oscar predictions. And his Oscar predictions are like exactly what happened during the award ceremony, right? So it's like spelled out word for everything that happened in it. And so it's really kind of weird that like these, he's predicting. And he made the joke about, all of the ballots that people have in their homes, the homemade ones that you sit around with the family and try and figure out who's going to win. But in this story, and this is, a screenshot of it, so I can't scroll down on the page here, but in the actual comment section, Neil Patrick Harris responds when one of the actual commenters says, yes, Microsoft couldn't, it says yet, as in Microsoft was able to predict the Oscars, predict the rise of smartphones and tablets. And so they're making fun of the idea that Microsoft is behind the game with Windows, phones and tablets and stuff. And then Neil Patrick Harris responds, no, not without robbing its advent-grade Oscar prediction, diversion of key resources and risking severe market cap. I'm just butchering this quote. Anyways, he's making fun of the fact that he was, he predicted this stuff on the Oscars. And then it goes on a little bit to a back and forth between Neil Patrick Harris. So it's kind of interesting that Neil Patrick Harris reads GeekWire. And it sounds like him. I can't say that somebody's not just using his name, but I've actually met him in person, and it sounds to me like It's him. And so let's, oh, and then one other thing that I wanted to talk about, and this is kind of just a piece of information I thought was fun because, nobody really talks about this stuff. The Oscars every year are nominated for, whatever best film and actress and all this kind of stuff, but every movie nowadays has a counterpart as a video game, and over time there have been video games that have won the picture has won best picture, or the movie, and then there's a video game adaptation to it. And so I wanted to and there isn't that many of them that have done this, and so I just thought I'd give a quick list of video games where the counterpart movie won an Academy Award. And so The Godfather, the video game, The Godfather won in 1972 for Best Picture. The Godfather 2 was also a video game, was made of that, and that won in 1974. Rocky was made into a video game, and Rocky's been in a number of video games, and that won in 1976. Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King was made into a video game, and that won the Academy Award for, I believe, Best Picture in 2003. And then they have nominees, things that didn't, win or whatever, and that's Jaws, Star Wars in 1977, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T., Beauty and the Beast, and these are all for Best Picture, all made into video games. Obviously, E.T. being the famous, video game that was the demise for Atari, if you believe kind of the story behind how that happened. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and then Avatar, Up, and Toy Story 3, all video games, and those are runner-ups. And so I just thought that was kind of a fun trivia fact, and it leads into our next story, and that's, it's kind of a segue. And this is one of the founders of the video game movement altogether, passed away yesterday, or was announced yesterday. And so Steve Bristow was one of the pioneers. He was like the first Atari employee. So you have Nolan Bushnell, who ran the company, hired him, and then he basically went on to oversee all of the video arcade division of Atari. So think Asteroid, Centipede, any of the famous Atari games, the coin-operated video games, Battlezone. I mean, they go on and on. I mean, Atari had hit after hit after hit in the 80s, and this was the guy that was behind them. He really got involved in video games early on with Space War, or what was referred to as computer space, which is by some considered to be the first video game. Goes back to the late 60s, 69, 68, somewhere around there. That used the vector scope thing that's round. And so he went on to stay with Atari through the years, and then obviously Atari went through its whole sort of change and ups and downs. I just said it. There was basically in the early 80s, and like I said, I mean, I don't want to get into too much of the controversy. A lot of people think that Atari, that E.T. is the game. They tried to rush it to market. They tried to beat the holiday season. The video game flopped because it just wasn't well designed, and so they made like a million of them, buried them in a landfill, and Atari went bankrupt. And by the way, they bought the rights to a lot of games. Winnie the Pooh. There was a bunch of them that never made it to market because Atari was spending the money to the rights. Now, to me, the real story, and you can go research this yourself, it's not really something I've heard people talking about. It's just something as I read, there's really no other conclusion to this. Is in the early days of Atari, they really followed the arcade versions where they, the Atari 2600, all the way up until the Jaguar, as a home console, was all about recreating the arcade experience at home. It was all about asteroids, Space Invaders, and bringing the home, the arcade game into the home experience. In the early 80s, the arcades started to die away, and you started to see the demise of the arcades. Video games were now in like your laundromat and a 7-Eleven and whatever liquor stores and other places where the arcade kind of got broken up and you didn't just find a concentration of them. And as that happened, Atari had to find a new marketing strategy, and it was no longer about the arcade at home. It was, what do we do next? And the next was licensing out the properties of other well-known characters and movies and video game things and stuff like that. And that's what really was the demise of them. And with that, leads us to, the next story, which is our This Day in Computer history, technology history. And on February 23rd, which would have been Monday, Atari was sold to Hasbro. That's in 1998. This was like this JTS company sold it. Atari had it was an independent company. It was run by Nolan Bushnell. Nolan Bushnell went into creating Chuck E. Cheese and really focused on that, and fell away from Atari, sold it. It was really broken up. So this story says that it was, that JTS sold it to Hasbro. They sold the intellectual rights to all of the properties and any patents or anything like that that Atari owned. The actual name Atari was sold to THQ, which went on to make the Tony Hawk's games off of this, and a lot of these other THQ made all kinds of video games under the Atari name that were more modern games, especially starting in about 2000. And then Hasbro, in an interesting, this is where I find it interesting, rebought back the Atari the company, all the rights to the company in 2005. So in 1998 they sold it. They sold it for $5 million. That's pretty affordable to anybody if you wanted to buy a video game company. In 2005, they bought back the Atari brand, the rights to everything for $65 million. So they paid, I don't know what that is as an increase, but you go from $5 to $65 million to buy the game back. And then after that, Hasbro started to incorporate under the Atari name things like Monopoly, Scrabble, Battleship, the Game of Life, Clue, Risk, Candyland, and even Dungeons and Dragons. And so the original game. So that's kind of a history of, in a nutshell. Now our next this day or sort of this week in tech history, and I need to move out of the way so you can see it, was February 23rd, same day in 1927. And I found this very interesting. Tomorrow, the FCC is going to vote on whether or not to regulate the internet as a utility. The entire concept of regulating radio was born in 1927 on February 3rd, the entire concept of it. So almost to the day are they voting to include the internet as part of the FCC's regulations. It started out as something called the Radio Act of 2000, slip up there. The Radio Act of 1927, and it created something called the Federal Radio Communications, or the FRC, which later was replaced by the Telecommunication, or the FCC, the Telecommunications Commission. And then ironically, the act claims to recognize broadcasters' right to free speech, and then their sole controls were allocated to licensing frequencies, transmitter power, and broadcasting hours. That was it. There was nothing else that was limiting to what the broadcaster could do. In other words, there was no dirty, there was no the 7 words or whatever you can't say on the radio, that kind of stuff. That was not part of the original FCC regulations, or at that time the FRC. So that's kind of interesting that it just happens to fall on within days of regulating the internet, and that exact worry. This is the exact worry that some people have, that if all this stuff that you can't do on TV or you can't do on radio, are they going to now extend that into the internet and start regulating or licensing or doing anything else to people's content on there? And there's a lot of people that are very nervous about the FCC being involved in the internet. And it's just ironic that it all started in 1927 of this month. Now, I thought I'd just include this since we're in Pasadena, another, see what we're doing on time here. And so, so this day in tech history, and now we're moving forward by one day. So in 1949, February 24th, the first U.S. rocket launched into outer space. And this was called the Bumper 5, and it was launched from the White Sands Proving Grounds in New Mexico. The rocket it goes into is a modified V-2 ballistic missile, and then it reached an altitude of 244 miles, which broke the unofficial record before that of 117 miles. And I will say this, that the officially is in quotes, and so I'm sure that there were other people or prior to 1949 had possibly gone into outer space. It's like this was the official record set, and so that's kind of interesting. So space travel started in 1949, and just since we're in Pasadena, this is, definitely a large part of what NASA does at JPL and Caltech and others at Art Center. There's all kinds of stuff that goes on here dealing with space travel. So let's move away from all this stuff and let's talk about Blogger. And so, Blogger, and once again, I hate to go ahead and correct headlines, but Blogger bans porn on Blogger. Tongue twister. Google bans porn on Blogger is not really the accurate way to put this. So Google has announced that a new policy will ban sexually explicit material on Blogger's platform. So if you want to consider that to be porn, that's porn, but whatever sexually explicit material tends to be. And it really isn't saying, the other thing is that's banning it. That's in the story. If you read and dig down into the story, it actually, what will happen is if you put up material on there that they consider or deem to be sexually explicit in nature, your account will automatically be switched to private. So any public, account that you have, if they deem it to be within the, violating their explicit, oh, that's not, wow, look at what we have to do. Welcome to Windows 10. So we certainly don't want to do this now in the middle of a show. So we're going to click on it. And so an interruption from Windows 10, and let's go for 8 hours, because we know the show will be over in just an hour. And then we'll click OK. And so, all right, so now we know I've got Windows behind me. And so, but anyway, so a little interruption there. But so Blogger will not ban it. They're not saying that you can't put this material up there. What they're basically saying is they will click it to private. And there's been all kinds of talk about, since Blogger is owned by Google, will Google do this to YouTube? And is this a way to test whether or not this is a way of flagging sexually explicit material? Not necessarily outright. And then there's all kinds of stuff. It says that they're still allowing nudity, that, for the example of artistic or educational, documentary, or scientific context. So I guess what will happen is if you have this material on a website or on a blog, that you'll have to make a case to Google as to why it's there. And then it says if your blog was created or before March 23rd of 2015 and contains the violations of the new policy, you have some options. And the first is that you can simply remove the violating content, or your blog and your blog will not be marked to private. If you want to continue hosting the posted public, explicit, or whatever images, your blog will need to be private going forward. The new policies, the third option is which is ditching Blogger altogether. So let's move on, because we're going to run out of time. And I just want to briefly go through this story really quickly. I'm just reading the headline. The FBI is offering a reward of $3 million for a Russian hacking suspect. And the interest here is that this is the most money ever, the bounty, if you want to look at it that way, ever put out on a hacker. And so this is a Russian hacker that's responsible behind the Game Over Zeus botnet, which has been used they're thinking that somewhere around $100 million has been sort of exploited through this hack. And then I'm not really, his name is right there in big letters across the screen, and so I really wasn't going to try and pronounce it. So, so it goes into the history of this. He's been accused of extorting millions of dollars from bloggers and businesses and things like that and customers since 2011. And then there's some from the Department of State. There's a statement that basically says this offer reaffirms the commitment to the U.S. government. It's PR talk about, yeah, we're really serious. We're charging $3 million, and then this ironically was like on all of the major, like CNN, on ABC News. This made its rounds on sort of the big network news stations today. And then now, I've said this before, eyes in the sky, drones in the news. We can't escape them. Drones are just going to keep going on and on and on. So get used to it. It's a category now. And so let's get right to the drone news. So our first story, this story should kind of scare anybody that lives in this particular area of Southern California. This is specifically in the San Fernando Valley, but a company called and I just want to make sure I'm getting it right. Where was the name of the company? Oh, AdNear. All right, so a Singapore location-based marketing company or a firm called AdNear is using drones to monitor people's cell phones activity and their location data and map out where they are. So they're flying drones around, and it's literally picking up the location of a person's cell phone and the data being transmitted in the distance away from the cell tower, and then it's able to locate within some, it's triangulation, it's within some precise distance of where that person might be. And they're doing this for advertising purposes, and so they're, to me that's a little bit, it worries me, but at the same time, I see what they're doing here. They've got you've got to opt in for it. It's an app that you've got to put on your phone, and basically what it does is, if you're walking to a coffee shop, this can tell that you're going there, and it can put some discount or coupon on your phone that if you show it to the person at, the place you're going, that you could get a discount or whatever. And so it kind of follows you around wherever you are, and it shows basically things that you might be interested in, locations of where you are. It sounds harmless. I just, if they can do this, I don't know that first of all, they don't need, and this is kind of the part of it that I'm really skeptical about. Like I said right at the beginning of the show, I'm kind of in this conspiracy, mood or something, or just being really skeptical of everything today. But they know it. If they can fly a drone, that information, stingers or whatever they're called, they're just putting these on a drone. They know where you are. They know where the cell phone tower is. They know, they can map out the location of people wherever you're going. And I was just telling somebody before the show here at the station, they do this all the time when you go into the mall, right? There are sensors all over a public mall is the best example of it, that will literally track you when you go around, and they want to know what patterns people take. So when you go in the mall, where do you go? You don't go to Radio Shack anymore. And so that was, a low blow, but that's, so the traffic's going to show you going from Target to, hot dog on a stick to, I don't know, the Apple store to wherever, and they know there's an ant trail between these places or whatever. They'll go put up the signs that, advertise the next trailer for a movie. Or have you seen all those things in the mall? So all of that stuff, and so what they're basically doing is taking that exact same concept here and adding it to the real world outside using drones. So the sensors, and there's sort of, there's all kinds of problems here with this company, the AdNear. First of all, or AdNear, they don't have the authority by the FCC. We know that from previous stories, that the commercial use for this, they're waiting for the rules to apply to them. And when these rules come into play, in the story, the actual founders of this company have said, we're going to have operators out there, all of our drones will be within 500 feet, they will all have a line of sight and all this kind of stuff. That's crazy, right? You're going to have, in fact, I was making fun of it, and I was saying this is going to be the new rooster on the corner trying to get you into the fried chicken place, right? The people holding the signs and, throwing them around or whatever to try and get you, in Pasadena, we got a guy that dresses up as the Statue of Liberty every tax season or whatever to get you into the tax place. This is the new form of that. You're going to have the guy in the corner with the sign and the controls to the drone flying it above your head so that, when you go by them or whatever, everything shows up on your smartphone. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I think it's an interesting use of drones. And then, if you start using drones in this fashion where you want them everywhere because you want as much location data as you can get, and then you've got things like Amazon delivering packages, the police using them for surveillance, and all of a sudden the skies get pretty crowded with nothing but drones everywhere, right? Forget about commercial use of me or anybody else just flying them up for recreational purposes. There are too many drones in the sky, and it seems like a pretty crowded or a crazy future in the drone world. So with that, doom and gloom on the drones, let's talk a little bit about another sort of, I don't know what you want to do with this one. Like I said, I can't escape this, skepticism. So the Secret Service is conducting a drone experiment in the U.S. Capitol region. I'll just skip right to the bottom of the story. It says that in January, a small drone crashed on the White House lawn property. Now they're conducting an experiment. There's all kinds of things that lead me to believe that this crash of a drone on the White House lawn was a publicity stunt. If you've ever seen the movie Wag the Dog, that'll give you a very good inside, look at how PR works, especially during, political campaigns. We are coming up to a presidential election. There's all kinds of stuff going on here. This just reeks of a PR stunt. You crash this, and by the way, 2 weeks prior to that crash in the White House lawn, the White House was briefed on this exact situation of how do we defend the White House, Pentagon, or anywhere else from drones. So 2 weeks after the one lands on the White House, I mean, it just seems like they're making an example out of this to show that this can happen. Now, a month later, we're looking at the Secret Service, basically saying that they're going to conduct an experiment where they're going to use drones in DC, which is an area that's banned from drone use, to conduct an experiment to see how to protect people from drones in an area that's banned from their use. In fact, we did the story on how, the operators of the Phantom, what is it, DJI or whatever the company, the initials for it are, is looking at putting in literally their firmware, the inability to fly drones in areas that are literally off limits for safety reasons, airports, areas that the large sporting events, that kind of stuff. And so, I don't know. So they're going to do this experiment. They didn't really answer any questions as far as to what this experiment is. They were just basically saying it's going to happen. So moving on to our couple of our last drone stories, and then I'm going to really run out of time, so I'm going to talk about one more, and I think I'm going to skip to our DIY tech tip. And so I think I've got like 10 minutes left, and so let's get, I'm looking at the stories here. I'm going to skip the eco ones, and I'm going to jump to this one because I've got two stories that involve the Eiffel Tower. So if you're watching any of the major networks today, they talked about mysterious drones spotted over Paris landmarks. 3 of them, one over the Eiffel Tower, one over the Louvre, and the other one was in the Bastille Monument, which is that arc thing in the middle. I've been to Paris, so I kind of know the area. And so the idea is who's flying these. Paris has a ban on drones. You're not allowed to fly them around the city. This was done at night. And it was actually done during an interesting time when the least activity, so the least amount of lights and stuff were going on in the city. And I'll just leave it at that. And the reason that I'm bringing up this is I kind of have an idea of why the drone flew, or maybe Eiffel Tower was in the news for a different reason this week. And so let's move on to our DIY tech tip, right? And so I found this very interesting. There were some people talking about Microsoft and tech support, and they were asking whether or not, Microsoft has something that's very similar to the Genius Bar. And so, let me bring this up on a thing. And so, it's called the Answer Desk. And so you can go to any Microsoft store, bring your laptop, and they'll do things like malware removal and tuning up your laptop. There's some limited stuff that you can do there that's free. And then there are levels of this, and you can do some services rather cheap, much cheaper than, I hate to do this, but the Geek Squad at Best Buy. And so $49, and you up the level, and they will give you some more stuff or whatever. But here's the thing that I thought was interesting that it says in this story. Let's say you have some relatives and you're the tech person in your family, right? This is my tech tip. And they're hounding you. I've got malware. My computer's slow. I don't know what's wrong with it. What you do is you go to the website for the Answer Desk. This is it. And you type in Find a Microsoft Store. And you type in the zip code or the area around where you, your relative, or anybody that you want to give this information to, and you find out where the nearest Microsoft Store is. You make an appointment and send them to the Microsoft Store with their laptop, and they will sit down with a technician, and they will go over some of the basic stuff that will help them, and they can learn about malware and some of the stuff that they need to, just some basics enough to get by. And this is a real big help. Trust me, your relative will thank you for this, that it gets you away from being the tech support person in the family all the time. but it also allows them to get literally help from people at Microsoft that kind of know how to talk to people or whatever, just to give them the basics. So that's my tech tip for the week or whatever, is to go to Microsoft, it's right here by the top of my laptop. It's called the Answer Desk. Type that in, search for it, and you'll get this page. Type in the address or the zip code of the location. Here, the closest one is out in, ironically, the San Fernando Valley in Topanga Plaza, to bring your laptop out. So if you're in Pasadena or anywhere around here, the other ones are the other way, like Costa Mesa and that direction. So whichever direction, but you can do this and make an appointment. Or if you're the geeky person in the family, send your relatives or other people that you want to help out with their some free maintenance or some free service on the laptop. So let's move on. I got 2 more stories, and these are kind of fun, so I left the fun ones for the end. So the first, what's considered to be the first selfie taken in outer space, 1966. So astronaut Buzz Aldrin snapped this sort of famous photo from Gemini 12, and he is claiming it's the first selfie ever taken. He's probably right. I mean, if you look at it, that's definitely a selfie photo. It's going up for auction. So tomorrow, if you'd like to buy this selfie and to have this up on your wall, the auctions are in London at the Bloomsbury Auctions, and it's expected to sell from anywhere from $750,000 to $1 million. And there's other famous photos from NASA that are also going to be auctioned off, including some from Apollo 11, the moon landing, the famous photo of the footprint, and a photo called Earthwise. And so, maybe we'll report back on how much this went for. But the first selfie and from space auctioning off tomorrow. And then this is the last story I have on the list before we get to the video, is the Eiffel Tower again in the news. And this time it's they basically renovated it. I mean, they took it and they decided that, and this is a no-brainer. It looks like a windmill to me. They put wind turbines on it, and now all of the electricity on the shops and things at the bottom floor are all going to be generated by these turbines at the top of the Eiffel Tower to generate electricity for the tower. I find this interesting. They also switched it to LED lights, so the lighting on it is now going to conserve energy and stuff like this. And being an icon like this, I'm sure there are other buildings that have the turbines on them, but all large buildings that are capable of generating their own electricity, it's something we should think of. It's this sort of getting off the grid, especially in urban environments. If you put wind turbines on the top of skyscrapers, nobody's really going to care. Trust me on this one. And so they show it. And the ironic part about this is the turbines are not actually at the top there. If you look at the photo, and it's hard to do because it's backwards, I'm in a mirror, they're about right there. So the turbines are in this area of the Eiffel Tower, and they don't look like turbines. They're like these spiral-looking things that move around, but they go with kind of the flow of what the structure looks like, and so they're not like big, propellers out there or anything like that. They're very discreet and go with the actual structure of that. So that's our last story. Since we were talking about drones, I want to leave you with one of the most spectacular drone videos I've seen. 2 people went out with one of these Phantom drones, and they actually captured some dramatic, not only images of a volcano, an active volcano, but there's some scientific modeling to go along with it. First time that the caldera part, or the actual crater of the volcano with lava in it, has ever been mapped this close. And so with that, until next week, here's scientific use of drones.
It's a glimpse into the center of the Earth. It's like listening to the heartbeat of the planet. The physiological effects of being inside the volcano are significant in that you have every force down there trying to kill you.
All right, so let's use the drone to.
I wanted to share the Maram crater that's located in the island nation of Vanuatu by bringing a team with me and documenting this place in a way that's never been seen. The drone that we used is called the Phantom 2 Vision Plus. We had also GoPros mounted onto these particular drones with gimbal devices so that no matter how much they shook, the video remained stable. We were able to take a series of thousands of photographs around the top of the crater and then process those using a specialized software to render the first of its kind 3D model of the volcano from inside. We were fortunate in that we got the footage we were looking for, and unfortunate in the fact that we lost our drones. They fell to their demise, some into the lava and others just from the incredible amount of heat and unstable air. You have sulfur dioxide and toxic gases that are superheated and just an incredible radiant heat that exceeds 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit standing right next to it.
Well, if you're looking for extreme locations, it doesn't get much better than an erupting volcano on Vanuatu. We were there to investigate how quickly microbial colonization happens on rocks. We certainly wouldn't imagine that there is life in the lava lake itself, just way too hot for anything to happen. But the instant the rock cools to below about 120 degrees Celsius, it's considered a habitable environment. Getting a handle on how microbes can colonize this particular substrate is a good example of what will happen across the planet and has happened across the planet throughout geologic time. Having the cameras everywhere, particularly during the sampling at the very edge of the lava lake, is critical because we can go back and see exactly how far we were from the edge, exactly how closely distributed these newly formed rocks were. This isn't something you can measure in the moment. 3D reconstruction of the crater itself will be very useful, and figuring out which layers are iron rich, which layers are sulfur rich. Within the caldera as a whole, there's certainly life. Coating the walls as you go down, on some of the surfaces down at the bottom, almost certainly there's a high microbial constituency.
The greatest scientific value is just having videographic support that can be used in tandem with other research that's happening in the world. I really believe there's an opportunity to merge those worlds of exploration and tech, and coming back and reporting on all kinds of information that has not yet been discovered.